The year I finally paid attention, I'd lost 2/3 of my tomato crop by August. Not to drought, not to disease. To hornworm pressure I could not get ahead of no matter what I put on those plants. 3,200 row feet, gone soft by midsummer. That was year 11 on this farm, and it was the season I stopped trusting what I'd always done. I've been farming this land for going on 23 years. 41 acres in production, about 12 of that in mixed vegetables at any given season. I grow tomatoes, peppers, squash, beans, and a rotation of greens across raised beds and open rows both. I've run the full spectrum of pest management over those years. Sprays, row covers, beneficial insect releases. I paid a lot of money for that did almost nothing. Traps, barriers, you name it. I've kept records every season since year 4. What those records show is a pattern I didn't want to see for a long time. My pest pressure wasn't getting better. It was cycling. Some years worse, some years tolerable, but never actually solved. I was managing consequences I didn't understand I was causing myself. What I'm going to show you is what changed that. Not a product, a method. And once I understood why it worked, I understood why I'd been losing ground every season before it. Most gardeners accept the Saturday loop without questioning it. You walk your beds, you find the damage, you respond. You do the same thing next weekend. I ran that loop for over a decade before a conversation with an older Japanese market grower outside Fresno made me look at my own farm differently. He walked my rows with me and didn't say anything for a long time. Then he pointed at my tomato block. I was running about 800 plants that year, tight single-species rows separated by bare path. And he said something I've thought about nearly every season since. He said, "You've built a road to your farm. Every pest that wants what you're growing can find it without trying." He was talking about scent. Most of the pests doing the most damage to your crops don't navigate by sight. They navigate by smell. A hornworm moth flying 60 feet above your garden is tracking chemical signals that tomato plants release through their leaves and stems continuously, every hour of every day throughout the growing season. Her sensory system evolved over millions of years to find those signals inside complex, multi-species environments. Dense hedgerows, wild meadows, overgrown edges where dozens of plants are releasing dozens of competing scents simultaneously. When you plant a solid block of one crop, you strip away every competing signal. You isolate the scent of that crop in open air with nothing around it to interfere, to confuse, to create any uncertainty. To that moth flying her search pattern overhead, your row broadcasts like a signal flare in a dark field. She doesn't have to work to find you. You've made it impossible not to. That's the beacon problem. And it's not bad luck when they find you every year. It's design. Specifically, it's the absence of design. And it was the core mistake I'd been making across 41 acres without knowing it. The method that addresses the beacon problem is called the stick method. And the name makes it sound more complicated than the action is. You cut a woody aromatic stem from any strongly scented plant nearby. Basil, rosemary, wormwood, southernwood. You lay that cut stem across the soil surface in your target bed, horizontally, near your crop plants, tucked between them, or rested across the soil. And you leave it there. You don't plant it. You don't pot it. You don't do anything else. That's the complete action. Here's what I didn't understand until I started watching what happened after placement. A cut aromatic stem doesn't go inert when you sever it. The cellular breakdown that starts after cutting actually drives faster volatile release in the first several days. The aromatic compounds stored in the leaf and stem tissue keep diffusing outward as those cells break down. Depending on the plant and your local conditions, a single stem continues working for 2 to 3 weeks after cutting. You're not placing a dead twig in your bed. You're placing an active chemical emitter. It works without you. The first season I ran this on my pepper block, about 300 plants across 2 beds, I placed cut basil stems every 4 feet through the rows in week 1 of July. I'd been fighting aphid pressure on those peppers since mid-June. By week 3 of July, I was seeing significantly reduced activity on the treated beds versus the untreated block I'd kept as a comparison. I've now run this comparison across 4 full seasons on different crops. The pattern holds every time. Here's the mechanism. The hornworm moth, flying her search pattern over your tomato bed, now encounters a different chemical environment than she expects. Instead of a clean tomato signal in open air, she's picking up tomato scent underneath basil volatiles, compounds that register in the same sensory range as the tomato chemistry she's tracking. Her navigation system evolved to find tomatoes inside complex, competing environments, not to sort a target compound away from another plant placed right next to it. The competing compounds don't just partially mask what she's looking for. They disrupt the certainty she needs to commit to a landing. Without that certainty, she moves on. That is not a complete solution on its own, but it's the first layer, and it's the one that stops most of the pressure before it starts. The second thing I missed for years, and this one cost me more than I want to calculate, is that the stick method does more than confuse incoming pests. Cut basil placed near tomatoes also attracts braconid wasps, parasitic insects that lay their eggs inside hornworm caterpillars before those larvae ever get the chance to do damage. Those wasps were already living within flight range of my farm. They're living within range of yours. The problem was, I'd been spraying them away. Every time I treated my tomato block for hornworm, I was also eliminating the parasitic population that would have handled the next generation without me. I was doing it every season, resetting the predator population to 0 while the pest population rebuilt resistance. My spray schedule wasn't protecting my crop. It was protecting the hornworm's long-term prospects. Basil volatiles are one of the chemical signals that draw braconid wasps in and hold them resident near your plants. When you run cut stems through a tomato bed, you're not just scrambling pest navigation. You're sending a resident signal to the insects that eat your pest for you. Year 16 on this farm was the first year I ran a full aromatic companion system across my tomato and pepper blocks. That was also the first year I didn't need to spray those blocks at any point in the season. I've told that story to other growers and watched them not believe it. I didn't believe it either until I lived it twice. There's a third layer, and it runs underground. This is the one most home gardeners never get to because you can't see it happening. French marigolds, specifically the species called Tagetes patula, release compounds from their root systems into the surrounding soil while they're growing. Those compounds are toxic to root knot nematodes, microscopic soil pests that attack the root systems of tomatoes, peppers, and most of the crops in the nightshade family. The damage they cause: stunted growth, reduced yield, plants that stall and never hit their potential, looks almost identical to nutrient deficiency from above the soil. I spent 3 seasons amending and fertilizing a section of my tomato ground that had nematode pressure I hadn't diagnosed. 3 seasons buying inputs for a biological problem that fertilizer could not touch. 1 border of French marigolds planted around that section. Root exudate suppression runs through the full growing season. The nematode pressure in that ground dropped visibly within 1 season and has stayed down in the years since. Tagetes patula self-seeds reliably in most climates. You buy 1 packet of seed, you establish your border once, and if you let a few plants set seed at the end of the season, the border replants itself the following spring. I haven't bought marigold seed in 7 years. That problem section is now some of the most consistent ground on this farm. Here is the thing I want you to sit with. These 3 layers don't just add to each other, they compound. The aromatic cuttings reduce the pest navigation that brings insects in the first place. The resident predators, the ones drawn in by those same aromatics, catch the pests that make it through the scent interference. The root compounds suppress the soil-level threats that neither surface layer can reach, and over time, as the soil biology builds and the beneficial insect populations become self-sustaining, the system gets stronger on its own. It deepens every season without you doing more. That is the opposite of what spray-based management does. A spray is effective on the day you apply it, and slightly less effective each subsequent season as pest populations develop tolerance. You buy more. You rotate chemicals. You manage a problem that never resolves. I know that cycle. I ran it for 11 years. A designed bed exits that cycle permanently. Once the 3 layers are in place and running, the ongoing input is effectively 0. The ongoing labor is lower than the pest management schedule most people run every weekend. You built the system once. It defends itself. If you're starting from a single container or a raised bed, you don't need to install all 3 layers simultaneously. Start with week 1. Cut a rosemary or basil stem from any plant you can source and place it across the soil in your most pest-affected bed. That's it. A 4-inch pot at a garden center runs about $2 to $3 if you don't already have one. The stem works immediately. Week 2. Plant 1 French marigold at the edge of that bed. The root layer starts the same day. Week 4. Compare what you see in that bed versus any bed you haven't touched. You will have a measurable comparison before the month ends. If you're working a container setup, a single large pot runs all 3 layers in the same soil. Your main crop at the center, a cut aromatic stem across the surface, 1 marigold at the edge. The scent disruption, the predator attraction, the root suppression, all of it active in the same 16 inches of growing space. The system doesn't require acreage. It requires relationships. I've grown on this land through drought years and wet years, and the kind of August heat that makes you wonder every afternoon what you're doing out there. What I know after 23 seasons is that the ground rewards design over reaction. You can spend your weekends managing a problem, or you can spend a few hours in spring designing a bed that doesn't build one. The pests don't stop existing, but they stop finding you. And that is a different farm entirely.